then we will fulfill the goal of building the Islamic Ummah. And you can do your research on that. Every family needs to have 2.8 children. Some of us have fulfilled our quota.
Can we give it to
So-
someone else?
Sorry, what do you mean by 2.8? That's a joke.
In order for society to maintain itself, each couple needs to have 2.8 children. Otherwise, we will die out because there won't be enough men and women to actually keep producing.
So someone can have 6.
And so somebody can have 6. You can do the averaging out. You're an accountant major, so you
Because I think there's enough people in the society that they're having a far more than 2.8.
okay.
They can make up the difference.
But are they Muslim? You see, that's the key.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Why does that have to be the key? Because isn't it incumbent on all of us to spread the deen, so it doesn't matter how many people are being born? It's actually a good thing if there's a lot of non-Muslims out there, because we'll be spreading seeds and making more Muslims without the new population.
Well, the hadith says that one of the reasons that we marry is to produce more Muslims. It's actually from the hadith, so that's where that comes from. We actually covered that last week, and I gave you the proofs of that. So one of the things that a man seeks, and I want to just make sure that I say something that I didn't say last week. One of the things a man looks for is a fertile woman, so that he can produce more children and more Muslims, inshallah. So, but if you have a fertility problem, you offer many other things besides fertility. So, you know, when I meet sisters that have done everything they can do to have children, my heart is often filled with pain because they have such a desire to have children and they are unable to have children. So, but they are able to give so much more. So, you know, Allah doesn't make mistakes. So I want to make sure that you don't think there's something wrong with you Islamically if you are not fertile. Okay. It is not allowed for a man to marry and then claim that he did not really mean what he agreed to, and that is one of the reasons why Allah instructs us to enter into a written contract that is signed by reputable and trustworthy witnesses. So you can't sort of go to the nikah and sign and not sign anything and then say, well, you know, I really didn't mean this. I was just kidding. You know, after you spend $100,000 on the walima, which is sort of strange because Islamically the walima is to be done when? After the marriage is consummated. But what do most people do?
Before.
They do it before. But they're missing the boat on the sunnah, but that's okay. Yes, sister?
So if person is not written, the nikah is not valid?
No, it should be written. That's from the Quran.
But if they don't do it?
I'm going to show you all that today. I'm going to go through all the conditions of the contract. Every single one of them. There's 6. I'm going to cover all of those today, inshallah.
Does this hold for women too?
Yes. Everything is for men and women. Islam is an equal opportunity religion, contrary to what Fox and CNN says. Everything that I say, the essence of what I'm saying, is true for men and women.
So did we kind of already talk about this before? Are we going into depth in the contracts now, or did we?
We're actually going into the requirements of a contract.
Okay. So
Did I answer your question? My eustachian tube is stopped, so I'm trying to read lips.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So, what did we talk about before? Because
Before we were talking about what we look for.
Okay.
We talked about the kippah, the courtship, and how that's supposed to be done.
Okay.
Those were the things that we talked about.
And the kippah is the engagement, right?
The kippah is the engagement, yes. Yeah. But not in the American sense, because in the American sense, if you use the word engagement, Americans say, and I am 7th generation American, so everything I say is obviously sort of general in this regard. They say that's the time that you try the shoes on before you wear them. We don't believe in that Islamically. There's no test drive. So, you know, you either buy the car or you don't buy the car, but you don't get to test drive it before you buy it Islamically. So, important to look at that. Abu Hurairah reported that Allah's Messenger said there are 3 matters that are considered serious in both serious and non-serious talks: marriage, divorce, and returning a wife who was divorced, a non-terminal divorce, which is that 3rd talaq. Okay? Basic elements of the contract. The Islamic marriage contract has 6 conditions, 2 pillars, and 1 obligation, and 1 optional element. Is this up there? Oh, good, okay. Dropping a condition or a pillar invalidates the contract. Intentionally dropping the obligation is a sin. So here are the 6 conditions. A bridegroom's eligibility. And I'm going to cover that from the Holy Quran so that you understand what I mean by that. And a bride's eligibility. Now, if I am in the middle of talaq, am I eligible to be married?
You man, you can. No.
No. No. If I'm in the middle of my talaq, I am not eligible. So bridegroom's eligibility, bride's eligibility, bridegroom's consent, bride's consent or permission, the wali's approval. Now we're going to talk about the wali's role, not today but later on, and who is required to have a wali. And the presence of 2 trustworthy witnesses. And I just want to say for a minute that sometimes I've been counseling people that call me and they want to get married. And of course, this is the way the phone conversation goes. Imam Sykes, we want to know if you can do a Bangladeshi wedding. Or we want to know if you can do an Egyptian wedding. Or we want to know if you can do a Pakistani wedding. Or we want to know if you can do a Guyanese wedding. And I said, look, I don't have a Cheesecake Factory menu of various kinds of weddings. I just do a wedding according to the Quran and the Sunnah. If there's some cultural stuff that we can fit into that, I'm happy to do it. But we first have to have these things. But you'd be surprised that the bid'ahs that people think that are actually part of the Islamic wedding have nothing to do with it. So, 2 pillars. The offering, because it's ijab, and the acceptance, which is called qabul. Now, later you will learn a few exceptions to the rule, but the wali, who is typically the father, grandfather, uncle of a Muslima, will actually give away, so to speak in the American terms, the Muslima. And the person will agree to accept the principle based on God's laws and the conditions to which they have agreed. And that's what they will say. I accept such and such and such and such a person based on Allah's laws and the conditions to which we have agreed. And that is usually spelled out in the contract. Obligation is the dowry, and the optional elements are the imposed conditions. Now, there is an argument among the scholars because some people will say, can I put it in my contract that my husband will not have a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th wife? Some scholars will say you cannot put it in there because the Quran allows men to have that. I don't hold that point of view, but I can see their argument, and Allah knows best. Because we all know what we can deal with and what we cannot deal with. And by the way, I certainly can't understand why we couldn't put it here, because in this country you cannot have but one. And if you have more than one, you are breaking the law. And as Muslims, you are obliged to abide by the laws of the land in which you live. This is Sharia.
Okay, so what if you have more than one, but one is by the court and the other one's just still in?
Well, it can't be Islamic. Because the moment, let's say that I'm married to Nuran, we have a civil license and an Islamic license. Islam says I must obey the rules of this country. So I go and I get another woman to marry me, and I go to an imam and I say, we just want to get married Islamically. Well, how can that be Islamic if Islam says I have to abide by the laws of the land? I'm not married Islamically. That's a joke. That's a joke about it. Let's look at what Islamic marriage is. If it says that men are the maintainers of women, because Allah has given the one more economical strength than the other, and because they provide for their means. Surah Al-Rum, Surah 30. I'm going to get to you, just one second. I won't forget you. So, if I am maintaining a woman and I die, how can I maintain you when you have no rights to anything I have because you're not legally married to me? As the Qawaman, look at the Islamic essence. The Qawaman from Qawam means Qiyam. The man is supposed to empower the woman to stand independently. So I marry a second wife, she's got no rights in this country, I die. She's nobody. She's left out in the cold. How can that be Islamic? It's not according to Islamic principles, folks. But the sad part is not only are men marrying more than one wife in this country, women are marrying more than one man. And I'm not kidding you. Muslim women are marrying more than one man. What they do is they'll be married to a man and they don't have their legal divorce. So they go and they marry another person, they just get an imam to do it, and they call it an Islamic marriage. How can that be Islamic? That's a liability to our faith. It's a lie. It makes a laugh of our religion. Because people are operating in ignorance. How can that be Islamic? How can you be a garment to someone when the idea of talaq is reconciliation, and you're out there finding another one and it's not even over? That's not Islamic. But when we talk about something being Islamic, we've got to look at the whole picture. And before I get to you, Ibrahim, the brother had a question. I don't want to forget you.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, if you move, did the law that you abide by, do they change?
Well, if you come to America, they will not honor your second, third, and fourth wife. They're only going to honor one. I don't know how that's dealt with. I'm sorry, I've never had to deal with that, but I know that this country only allows you to have one wife. I've not ever seen a place that you work that says, okay, your life insurance, you can put 4 wives on there. But we got a lawyer here, so maybe he can help us out.
Your life insurance can be divided up any way
Any
you
way
want
you
to.
want, yeah.
And also, your estate can be divided up any way you want to. So if you've already got this situation going, you just have to do some paperwork and make sure everybody gets their fair share. The marriage itself won't be recognized, but the actual, I mean, here everybody has girlfriends. So, you know, a famous guy used to say when he was asked in court, who is this person? Who is this person? Oh, this is just my girlfriend. And this is a real famous guy who, you know, an imam.
As far as division of property, it depends on the states. Because you can say what you want in your will, but your legal husband has a right to overdo that.
That's true to the extent that you don't get there. You can sign away your rights beforehand. You can make.
But if you don't, and you have a legal husband, that will is null and void.
Let me tell you what concerns me. You see, we got one lawyer in the group. And he would...
Technically.
Yeah, well, Yazan is not on the bar yet. He's on his way.
And he's not touching
But
things.
here's the point that I'm trying to make. Are you fulfilling the Islamic part of it? Has anybody here witnessed somebody marry a second, third, or fourth wife in the United States of America, go to a lawyer, make sure everything is down to a T Islamic?
Absolutely not. No.
See, that's the point. See, when we talk about something being Islamic, we're not looking for the loophole. That's called invasion, right? No, evasion. Evasion. We are looking to fulfill the pleasure of Allah. Yes, Ibrahim.
And you know, when you're reading about this, conditions about the marriage contract, it's in Surah Al-Nisa, right? It writes the woman and the rights of the marriage woman. So, and Allah, I think I remember Allah is constantly also saying that fear Allah.
Absolutely.
Because He knows that there are loopholes in this thing, and He knows there are people that will try to take advantage of it. You know, so He constantly says, fear Allah, because Allah knows what you're doing at all times.
Dr. Saad.
Sorry, Imam Sykes, I don't want to, we're all asking so many questions, but I wanted to point out, because there's a lot of converts here, is that when the 4 wives was made and, permissible, it was actually down, because people used to have hundreds. So it was not something that, all right, all of a sudden, if you are a Muslim, you can have 4 instead of 1. No, it was actually, people had 70 wives, 60 wives, 55, 32. There was no upper limit, and a limit was set. So it was actually below what most people had. That's the first thing I wanted to say. And the second thing is, if I may be wrong about this, but I thought I read this somewhere, that this was soon after Battle of Uhud, where a lot of there was not a single family in Medina that had not lost some men to that battle. And so there was a very, the number of women suddenly, mushroomed, and the number of men just shrunk to nothing. And this is not a society where women drove, or women had their own businesses, or women could feed their children independently. This is a matter of survival. Those women would have probably died if they didn't. And a lot of Prophet Muhammad's wives, were older women, widowed, divorced. So this is not something that Allah is giving you a choice that you can have a taste of different versions of a woman. It is actually for protection of the society.
Very, very well said. 13 of the Prophet Muhammad's 14 wives were widows. So when men start talking to me, I'll say, oh, well, let me find some widows in the community for you. And they get really upset with me. Because some of the scholars say that one of the reasons that this was prescribed, and Allah knows best, was that because these women might have had to turn to prostitution to survive in that day. Remember that they came from a society that women had not been valued until Islam. And some of that was still very alive. Look at the racism that's still alive in America today. And we have people that actually believe there isn't racism in this country anymore. Isn't that a joke? Yeah. So, great points. Thank you. As a matter of fact, if you read the verse before take 2, 3, or 4, what is it talking about specifically? It's talking about orphans and widows. Look at it in Surah 4, Surah An-Nisa. So the very context of taking more wives is about responsibility, not sexual pleasure. Nowhere in the Quran does it say if you've got a libido that's going out the ceiling, go get 2 or 3 wives and take care of it. Does it say that? That's not what this was about. This was about dawah, particularly for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, brother.
Every other religion didn't put a cap until much recently on the number of wives. Christians and Jews could have multiple wives, multiple
Exactly.
wives. And we were actually the first ones that put a cap on 4.
That's right.
So that's...
According to the Bible, if I remember correctly, King Solomon had 400 wives. Now that's probably something that was added by man, but if you read the King James, I believe that King Solomon had 400. Does anybody here can tell me I'm right?
Do you know the exact verse of it?
No, I don't remember the verse, but I'm pretty sure if you just Google how many wives did King Solomon have,
I read that.
I think it was 400. Yes, brother. I'm sorry.
The ayah says that you can marry more than one.
Yes.
But if you cannot take care of more than one, marry one. So actually, Islam says marry one.
Yes. And it encourages the marrying of one, and it says it's almost impossible to be just. Because think about it. When it says men are the maintainers of women, that's plural, because Allah has given them one more economic strength, you've got to give the equal quality of life to every single wife. So even if you are a minimizer, and you got 4 Honda Fits and 4 wives and 4 little houses in a nice community somewhere, you got to be banking some bucks to handle all that. And you better have some strong piety. Because I know someone in South Africa that has multiple wives, and when the one wife gets mad, all 4 of them get mad, and God help that fellow.
So you have to make the mistake once, but you can't repeat it.
I'm so glad you're back.
We missed you, brother.
Yes, sister, I'm sorry.
You see, it's also in the Quran it saying 3 or 4, but if one is good if you knew. And
Yes, if you knew.
Them the advice not to do that.
Please hear me. I'm not promoting this. I'm saying it's illegal in America. So there's a lot of defense going on here. It doesn't need to be because you're speaking to the choir, but
From what it says here, he had 700 wives and 300 concubines.
he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Sounds like a politician in D.C. to me. Yes.
I don't know. If I was a male, I'd be like, 2 more wives or Maserati? I think I'll do the Maserati. Less headache, more fun.
Somebody else, yes, brother.
I was just clarifying, I'm not defending anything. The question came, what if you came from a place?
Right. No, I understand. We do try to have a little humor in this class to break up the seriousness, even though this clearly is a serious subject, and maybe I shouldn't be joking. Let's talk about the bridegroom's eligibility. This is a big controversy. I often get asked the question, why? Remember we're talking about the bridegroom's eligibility. What makes him eligible? I get asked the question, why does my groom have to be a Muslim? That's not fair because a Muslim man can marry a Jew or a Christian, but I got to marry a Muslim. And there are not many good ones. I get told this all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
And I have to say, I hear you ladies. I hear you loud and clear. Because people come and ask me to recommend guys, and a large portion of the guys that I know are having some problems. Big problems. So,
Thank you for your honesty.
absolutely, you can count on that always. So, according to the Islamic teaching, a Muslim woman should seek out a Muslim man so that there's no conflict with the children. And he is actually your shepherd. How can he really be your shepherd? Look at the whole picture. How can he really be your shepherd and your imam if he cannot lead you in prayer? So I understand the struggle. I really do. But when we look at the principles of Islam, what we need to be doing is how can we encourage these men to get into fatherhood groups, to get into men's groups, and begin to evolve spiritually. And I do think there's a need for that. I think instead of men just going to the masjid and praying, they need to be going to the masjid and being taught, evolved, elevated spiritually. Because a lot of people run in and pray very ritualistically and run out, but does it change their life? Do they evolve? The man should be chaste. There is a double standard in Islam. It's almost as if...
I chased you.
Yes, you did chase me. All the way from South Africa. That's not the context of chaste in this particular slide. This means that men should also be virtuous. But there is a double standard that I see in Islam. If a man slipped and made a mistake, it's almost as if, alhamdulillah, mashallah, he's a man. So that's all right. But if a woman makes a mistake, she's ineligible. Even though the Prophet married 13 non-virgins. So that is our problem. It's a cultural problem. It's not based on Islamic principles. We are both supposed to be
question. It was, I think you meant to say, the double standard isn't in Islam, it's in culture.
Thank you. I did say it. I followed up by culture.
Right.
But you're right, 100% right.
Universal issue.
But people even come, non-Muslims, almost every college I lecture in, and I'm in an average, if you average it out over the year, I'm in an average of at least 2 colleges a week. And people come to me and say, well, I had a Muslim boyfriend. And I say, well, there's no such thing. Oh, no, he was from, and I don't want to pick on the country, so I'm not going to say. And then I talk about chasing. Well, he wasn't chased, because he sure was chasing me. They should also be sane. Well, that means a lot of men in our community are exempt. Okay, right there. Yes, somebody, Susan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I have a very close friend who you met, and I'm always telling her that I could probably find her a good Muslim husband, even though she's Christian. But she says, well, you know, I've never dated a Muslim. I said, if a Muslim asks you out on a date, run. Run. Just run.
Yeah, but you know, I gotta say this. It's not from Islam, but it's happening. So when I'm asked this question in colleges, I say, it is contrary to the teachings of Islam, but do Muslims date? Yes. And I can tell you that I know people who lead prayers that are not married, that were dating. And I'm just going to leave it at that. It's just what's really going on. And if you want to lie and be in the dark and pretend it's not going on, you have that choice. But that's not the reality of our ummah today. The reality is that our kids are dating. And what I love is when a parent comes to me and says, MashaAllah, my daughter or my son is so good. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. They're so pure. But they don't know what that child has told me. I say, Alhamdulillah, MashaAllah. I'm so happy for you, sister and brother. MashaAllah, Allahu Akbar. I say it quick, because I have to make sure that I maintain my composure. Because they've told me some things that made the hair stand up on my back, the spiritual hair. Yeah. So you must be sane. Now, remember when I talked about how important it is, one of the 6 reasons that you can talk about a person, sometimes referred to as slander, is that when you are getting married, if the person you're marrying, say, has visual or auditory hallucinations, don't you think you should know that before you marry them?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's allowed. People hide this stuff. The same way that if a person is impotent, you should know this before you marry them. They have to have reached puberty. So there's no, what's it called, a cougar? In America, cougars, the older women getting the younger guys, that's a cougar, right? Yeah. You've got to have reached puberty, okay? No cougering allowed.
Yeah, we wouldn't know.
Now, may not be related to the bride by permanently prohibiting blood, milk, or marital relationship. And I'm going to cover all of these. Now, there is a misnomer out there that if you breastfed a child, that child cannot be married to your child. It has to be 5 suckles, and I'm going to give you that full feeds. I'm going to give you the hadith for that, authentic hadith. I remember when we had children in LA, the ladies were breastfeeding, and sometime there was this discussion about sharing milk and various things. And the lady, oh, astaghfirullah, no, I don't want Sister Duran to breastfeed him because then he can't marry Nasiha or Camila or Halima. It has to be 5 full suckles, and I'll give you the proof of that. Okay? And that's the milk. We'll talk about the prohibited blood ones, and so that you get a clear picture of this.
I'm sorry, Mom, like I said, a woman is a baby is allowed to suck a baby's allowed to breastfeed from another mother?
Yes.
Of course.
And nothing will happen to that baby?
Yes. Muhammad Halima was his nursemaid. As a matter of fact, the custom of the Arabs at the time was when a child was born, he would actually be taken into the Bedouin areas because it was a healthier immune system there, and the Arabic was so pure. They would be taken there for 3 or 4 years and taken care of by a nursemaid. Halima was the nursemaid of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and then brought back to the mother. So this was the custom of the time. As a matter of fact, this is why in the Holy Quran it recommends that you breastfeed for a minimum of 2 years. This is actually in the Quran. And it talks about the father can pay someone else to do that. So people it was their job. Yeah. So women actually who are not pregnant can begin to lactate again. By simply letting a baby latch onto them, they will start back lactating.
Milk mothers.
Yes, they become milk mothers. They may not be related to the bride by a temporary prohibiting marital relationship, and I'm going to cover those so you know exactly what they are, because there is some really gray areas out there about this. They must perform the contract willfully and not by compulsion. If I hold a gun to someone's head and say, I really would like you to marry my son, is that willful?
No.
No, that's compulsion. Yeah, that's compulsion. It's got to be willful. Bride's eligibility must be a Muslim, Christian, or Jewish female. Should be chaste, should be sane, may not be married or still in iddah from another man, may not be related to the groom by permanently prohibiting blood, milk, or marital relationship, may not be related to the groom by a temporary prohibiting marital relationship, must perform the contract willfully and not by compulsion. Here are the prohibited marital relationships. Permanently prohibited women. Permanently prohibited women are the women that a man may never marry. Permanent prohibition can be as a result of blood, marriage, or foster, breastfeeding relationships. A man is a mahram to any woman who is permanently prohibited to him. Allah mentions the permanently prohibited women in Surah An-Nisa, Surah 4, verse 22, and do not marry the women whom your fathers have married, except what is already past. Indeed, that was a shameful and hateful act to Allah and an evil way.
Okay, so if your father married a woman that you're not related to, and somehow something happens to him, he passes away, and you decide that you want to take care of his woman, that's prohibited.
It's prohibited if he died. It's not prohibited if he died. I'm going to give you some exceptions though. So if you hang with me, I believe I'll answer all your questions. But if I run through this, it'll make a lot more sense.
Because it reminds me on a case I read on BBC News that there was a French couple that his father, the man's father passed away, and his stepmother was left alone, so they decided to get married. You know?
That's a different situation. I'm going to cover that. Okay, that's a different situation. It goes on to say, prohibited to you for marriage are your mothers, daughters, sisters, paternal aunts, maternal aunts, brothers' daughters, sisters' daughters, foster mothers who breastfed you, and this is clarified by the Hadith, 5 full suckles, foster sisters, and I'm going to explain what foster sister means, because to be a foster sister, it means that your father has to have had intercourse with that sister's mother. Okay? In some cases that doesn't happen. I'll give the exception when I get there. Now, I don't want you to get confused in advance. I'll confuse you later. Stepdaughters under your custody and born of your wives with whom you have had intercourse. So, have I been married to three different women, and one of them, let me explain it in the thing because I don't want to mix you up here. There is no sin upon you if you marry their daughters, the wives of your sons who are your own offspring, and that you simultaneously marry to sisters except for what is already past. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful. So there are 14 people, basically, and we'll go over them. And also prohibited to you are all married women, except those, and I think, unfortunately, some people are not getting it today, it's also married men. Except those captives and slaves that your right hand possesses. This is Allah's decree upon you, and lawful to you are all women beyond these, provided that you seek them in marriage with gifts from your monies, desiring chastity, not unlawful sexual intercourse. Later on in the class, I will talk about something called Muta. It means temporary marriage, which is absolutely prohibited, folks. This is something from certain sects that call themselves Muslims, but this is prohibited in Orthodox Islam.
Like the Shiites, they do that a lot?
Some of them do, yes.
And also, this one is called, I think, in Misyar, or something like that. There it is called Misyar.
Yeah, I think you're right, yes.
It's kind of like, it's kind of new. I mean, I never heard about it.
No, it was actually pretty old, but it
During the
doesn't
war,
come
right?
from the Quran or
Was
the
that
Sunnah.
during the wartime?
It was during the wartime, yes.
If they were in the city, they could.
But we'll cover that much later. I just want to let you know if you hear about that, it's not halal, okay? So don't think, your wife is going to New York for a little shopping trip, so I'm going to get myself a wife for the weekend. Sorry guys, to disappoint you.
What on Arabic means pleasure?